Presented exclusively by Mother's Polish.
Welcome back to a special midweek edition of the Slipstream, an F1 podcast hosted by me, Brady. And as always, joining me in the Slipstream tonight, we actually have a full grid. Austin, Matthew, and Cole Trickle Jr. Welcome back, Austin.
Thank you. Miami got the better of me, and I didn't make it last week.
Yeah, we missed you last week. And we missed you on the track tonight. We just wrapped up our weekly F1 2022 league on Twitch, on PlayStation, that we do each Wednesday night, especially during the season, down in Abu Dhabi to give us a little preview of the track. Cole is actually still in full race gear, wearing a helmet for those that watch on YouTube. How you feeling, buddy?
First and foremost, safety first. I don't feel great about it. I finished out of the points, a couple spins, but thank God I had the helmet on, hit the wall a few times, but yeah, we're all good. So ready for next week. Unfortunately, F1 season is ending this week, so Abu Dhabi, big FU, honestly.
Yeah, so not good for the brothers on the podcast, unfortunately. I'm sure you're full of sweat underneath that helmet. And congrats to you, Matt, on back-to-back victories for the first time in your esports career, if I'm not mistaken.
Thank you. Egghead gives a little more aerodynamic to the car. Makes me a little faster out there than everybody.
Yeah, I think that Egghead comment that we got, or that Matt got on social media, motivated him a little bit. Sometimes when your back's against the wall, you're getting all the social media banter, put up or shut up time, buddy.
Yeah, I mean, if the haters want to fuel me for these fake race wins, I'm all here for it. So,
congratulations. But yeah, since sadly it's the final race week of the season, we figured we'd do an Abu Dhabi preview episode to get everyone nice and prepped for the weekend ahead. And in 2023, from our podcast perspective, we do hope and plan to bring you preview episodes each week of race season. So let's get into it. We're back to Abu Dhabi. It's finally been a year. So first question I have for you gentlemen tonight. What's going to be talked about more this week? The fiasco of last year or things like Seb's retirement? Austin, what do you think?
Probably Seb's retirement. I would hope, let's, look at a positive light as opposed to focus on something that divided the entire F1 community for a full year.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I hope that that's what happens. But Cole, I know Abu Dhabi still seems to be somehow fresh on everyone's mind, the events of last year. I know I'm ready to move on. There's nothing we can do to change that. So yeah, let's spin the positive here. Let's not spend too much time on last year. How are you feeling about Seb's last race?
Well, it's not just Seb, right? When we have Seb, it's Danny Ricciardo, Nicholas, the GOAT, Latifi. We got a lot of last races this week in Abu Dhabi. So I'm really sad about Sebastian Vettel's last race. He's obviously been in the sport a long time. He's a character. He's a 4-time world champion. But let's not forget, like Danny Ricciardo, we don't know what's going to happen with him. Obviously, Nicholas Latifi is donezo. We all know it. We all agree with it. But, I mean, Seb has left the door cracked for maybe a comeback in a handful of seasons. But, yeah, I'm very much looking forward to the goodbye Seb, goodbye DR3 in Abu Dhabi. But I do think there's a little to talk about 2021. I mean, we're definitely not done with Lewis potentially of being an 8-time world champion. But if we're looking to move forward, then yeah, we didn't see Seb retiring. We didn't see Danny Ricciardo not having a seat next year. So a lot of drama coming into Abu Dhabi, honestly.
Yeah, I was thinking about this a little bit earlier. There's 4 drivers who are on the grid right now who will not be next year. Well, think as this podcast airs, we might find out the final decision with Haas. The strong rumors are of the last couple of hours, couple of days, is that it is going to be Nico Hülkenberg in that seat. So next year we will be without Cole, as you said, Seb, Danny Rick, Mick Schumacher, and Nicholas Latifi. So, yeah, I mean, for different reasons, all four of them will be having perhaps their final race. You know, I know Daniel Ricciardo hopes to find a seat in 2024. Whether or not that happens, we'll see. So, Matt, Seb's probably the obvious answer here, but who are you going to miss the most out of those four moving forward?
I love Danny Rick. I mean, he is his attitude, his smile, his infectiousness, like in the paddock. But man, I love a good crash. I love a good spin. I love a good ruining somebody's 8th championship. I mean, I wish I was Nicholas Latifi's grandchild in 50 years to just see how he spins his F1 career to them while he like bounces them on his knee, because there's no way he's telling them the truth. And it's just why I love the guy, because it's a career full of attached to mess ups. And you can't hate a guy like that.
Yeah, so Matt, how are you if you're Latifi in 50 years or 40 years talking to your grandson who wants to be a driver, perhaps? How's he recapping what happened last year?
Oh, I mean, I think he is telling him he still has a shot to potentially win the race. Like, I think that's what he's telling his grandchildren. Like, I was pushing hard. I thought I had a shot to win the last race of the season, and I just lost control. And then his kids are going to pull up whatever you want to call YouTube in 50 years and be like, Mom and Dad, Grandpa, it needs to be in a home because he doesn't make any sense.
And we don't know what technology is going to be like in 40 or 50 years. He might literally be able to put himself on the track and be like, Grandpa, you're full of shit. Like, you were battling Mick Schumacher for like P18 on whatever, 9 laps to go, and then all hell broke loose. Yeah, you know, it'll be interesting. You know, there's a part of me that'll miss Latifi. I do, obviously, and I know on this podcast we've done it, and, you know, social media and the world of Formula One has done it. You know, Nicholas Latifi is kind of the butt of a lot of jokes, right? Unfortunately, there hasn't been that many high moments in his Formula One career. And Cole, to your point, it's pretty clear why he won't be on the track next year. So I'm hoping he has a good final race. But we'll see. It is kind of interesting that, you know, a lot of these ends to the careers perhaps are happening in Abu Dhabi. It's the end of the season, end of the year, into the race season. I'll miss Danny Rick, the character. You know, Cole, you might have insight on these rumors, but it sounds like Mick may be slated for a reserve seat at Mercedes, and there's possibility of Danny Rick reserve seat at Red Bull. Is that right?
Yeah, so Toto had mentioned that the Schumacher name belongs to Mercedes. Obviously, Mick, his dad Michael had been there for years and years. So, yeah, Toto kind of leaving it open ended, where I'm not exactly sure what's going to happen with Mick, but it sounds like Nico Hülkenberg will sign at least a 1-year, if not a 2-year deal with Haas tomorrow. And that will leave Mick wide open. So potentially Mick to a reserve seat at Mercedes, and Danny Ricciardo. We literally have heard nothing about what he's going to do next season. There's nothing available, but it sounds like Red Bull may open him back with open arms. He's obviously got 9-win champion, or 9-win race winner, and I mean, he's obviously a great character, a great sport, and Drive to Survive really wouldn't be what it is without Danny Ricciardo. So I could see him ended up in a Red Bull again, no doubt.
He also seems to have gotten his footing underneath him these last couple of weeks too. Like, he's been fast out there, especially in, where was that, 2 weeks ago, 2 races ago? But
Mexico.
yeah. Yeah,
far
He
he.
was finger, pistol shooting people
Yeah.
on the straightaway.
I mean, like
That was
that's
great.
just great. Yeah, and he seems to have figured out that McLaren obviously too late. So I hope it's not the end for him. I hope he can find a seat in 2024.
Yeah, so that leads me to a question, and Austin, we'll start with you on this one. Who makes it back to the grid first, Mick Schumacher or Daniel Ricciardo, or neither?
I think Mick does, probably because he's just younger in his career. It still doesn't make sense, like the whole Nico thing. He's a seasoned veteran, but he doesn't really have the huge, you know, victories or successes in the past. But I would see that Mick maybe comes back in like 2 or 3 years. I mean, think about Ocon raced in 18 and 19. I think he was out in 20, came back in 21. There have been a handful of drivers like that. I think Mick has an opportunity to do it. I just don't know. I don't know, like if you bring Danny in, like is it like a mentoring session? And at that point, like where would it be coming to? Like I don't see Danny Rick being a benefit to Red Bull right now. Like he's not going to teach Max anything. He's not going to. I don't know. I don't know if it makes sense for a a comeback story for him if he doesn't get a drive next year.
Yeah, I think I agree. I think if you obviously compare their careers, Danny Rick's been in the sport a lot longer, so his willingness to take sort of a bottom tier seat might be less, obviously, than Mick. Mick's just looking to stick in the sport and prove that he has the ability that everyone thinks he might have. So yeah, I could see Mick, I don't know, mid-year next year or 2024 for sure getting another shot. Danny Rick, I don't know. I hope he gets another shot. I just don't know, if Williams picks up the phone because Logan Sargent has a bad weekend this weekend in Abu. Does he go into Williams? I mean, if it's Williams or bust, maybe, but it doesn't seem like that's where he wants to be in this point in his career.
And speaking of Logan Sargent, Cole, haven't you stated or said that if Logan Sargent doesn't get his super license points, that it could be Mick in that seat?
Yeah, I mean, why wouldn't it be, right? I mean, if Mercedes is talking about him being a part of the family, and he's got obviously no ride for a couple years, especially if Lewis signs a multi-year deal. I mean, Williams is his only opportunity with Mercedes. So if Logan Sargent doesn't end up qualifying for his super license points, I don't see why it wouldn't potentially be Mick Schumacher. But yeah, it's all speculation, so there's actually no telling. But Mick, I do think Mick will get a ride again. It just won't be with Haas. He will slowly make his name around teams who think they can sell some of the Schumacher brand. So obviously Mercedes is a huge part of that legacy. So yeah, why not be a reserve driver for Mercedes?
Yeah, so we'll see. If people are curious, obviously tune in to Formula 2 this weekend and see how Logan Sargent does to see if he earns his super license and ultimately earns his seat at Williams next year. So, yeah, I'm sure there'll be a lot of tributes this week, rightfully so, for people like Seb. Hopefully not as many for Danny Rick, because hopefully he does make it back. There'll probably be some tears this weekend, I would imagine. But let's talk about what else is on the line this weekend in Abu Dhabi. Unfortunately, if you do think back to last year, everything was on the line in Abu Dhabi with Max and Lewis coming into the race even on points and theoretically even on the last lap. So we don't have that situation this year, but there are a few other things on the line. So Stin, I know you weren't here last week, so just want to, one, get your opinion, and two, is Max going to help Checo get P2 in the Drivers' Championship this week?
I mean, he's said that he would. I think that everyone's come out. I think Helmut, Christian, Max, and Sergio have all come out and said that they will do what they can. I do think it's a shame that Max didn't give Checo the 2 or 3 points that he probably could have gotten from the sprint qualifying and the race. He said what he said. Whether I agree with it or not, I'm still his fan. I don't have to support it. It doesn't really change much. But I think there's definitely like a time and a place to have those conversations. And I think maybe the way that he packaged it to the entire world was definitely not the right way. So, I've been touting him that he's done pretty well this year as far as like media training, and he's just been a little bit different. He's, had a little bit less of a care. He's just been a little bit more flowy. And it's kind of like a step in the wrong direction. I know it rubbed a lot of people the wrong way, and I completely understand it. It definitely was cringe when I heard it too, especially when I came back and listened to like both of the audios at the same time. But it's in the past. Hopefully he supports Checo. I know Checo supported him a handful of times, and it would stink to think that the rumor behind why Max didn't help out Checo was that Checo had intentionally bended into Monaco, which seems interesting because there have been plenty of interviews and conversations between them and with them saying like how he's a great teammate and he appreciates him and all these other things, and in both ways. So like, you can't have your cake and eat it too. Like, you can't hold a grudge that's lasted maybe 6 months or 5 months since this happened.
15 races.
But completely overlook like that you're still really good friends and whatever. So again, it feels weird. It feels like we'll never get the entire story, and we don't need to. But if he had his reason and the team supports the reason or understands the reason, then whatever, move on from it. But hopefully he learns and I don't know, goes on next year. I mean, what do you do from here?
Yeah, and Max came out this week, and Matt, I know you might have comments on this, but Checo had a PR comment about, they talked about it, they buried the hatchet, excited about Abu Dhabi. But to set the stage, Sergio Perez is tied with Charles Leclerc with 290 points going into the last race of the season. And so, yeah, I'm sure both of them would like to be second in the Drivers' Championship. So, Matt, who gets it done this weekend?
I think it's probably Checo. Ferrari has not been up to par over the last 6-7 races. They don't have the pace. And we can say, I mean, Max has done so well in Abu, and it's Max. And I also think it's the Red Bull. Red Bull's kind of has Abu figured out from a track standpoint. And so I think Checo will beat Charles probably by several places on Sunday, would be my guess.
I think Checo specifically because like Max, not that he will, but Max can completely sacrifice his race. I think theoretically Carlos could, but if Carlos wins the race, like he could still get 5th in the championship. Like, you can't completely strand Carlos out on strategy trying to get second for Charles like you could with Max and Checo.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I mean, if you just look down sort of the order of the Drivers' Championship, Max obviously clear champion. Checo and Charles will battle out for second place. George will most likely be 4th, Lewis 5th, maybe 6th, depending on what happens between he and Carlos. And then there's not a whole lot of other battles until you get down to like Seb and Danny Rick are 1 point apart, and K-Mag and Pierre are two places apart. So at least sort of individually on the track, it seems like that's the biggest story going into the weekend in terms of who's going to get second. And obviously, it's a little bit more magnified because of the events of last weekend in Brazil. So hopefully cooler heads will prevail, and the better driver on the track will win.
Yeah, I mean, from Red Bull's standpoint, right, like from a PR standpoint and from a race standpoint to get 1 and 2, they almost kind of hope that Max is one spot behind or so going into Sunday than Checo, like on the grid, so that he can kind of do what he can, kind of what Checo did for Max last year to kind of let Checo get away from some people. I think they would really hope that Max, there is a visual that fans can see that Max is helping him so that this blows over. Because if it doesn't blow over going into the offseason, then they've manufactured something that should have never been out in the public to begin with.
Yeah, I think we've seen it a couple times. Like in France, Ferrari did a great job doing the toe, right? Like there have been a couple of really well constructed like team moments in qualifying. I think Abu Dhabi's a really fast track, especially with the modifications in Sector 1 and Sector 3. What did they trim? Like 8 seconds off the lap time from the old track. So it's very fast. Um, Generally some decent tire deg. I think Red Bull, Matt, you said it earlier, like Red Bull's fast in the straights. Mercedes kind of is too now. Ferrari really like does well in those, slow to mid-speed corners, kind of the windy bits, as a lot of the commentators say now. So one, I kind of think that Red Bull can get away with a 1-2. But I also think that Mercedes might be knocking on the door for a 2 in the constructors potentially.
Yeah, we talked a little bit about this last week, and I know you weren't here, Austin. Ferrari has a 19-point lead, so it feels like it's a little bit of a stretch. But obviously, if Mercedes goes 1-2, you never know what could happen. If they go 1-2 again, I think watch out. They're going to smoke everybody in 2023. I don't think that'll happen in Abu. If you think about Brazil, a little bit higher altitude like Mexico seems to help their performance. I mean, we'll see. Maybe they have figured it out. And I know there was a little bit of a difference between Lewis and George's wings last week, which gave Lewis a little higher straight line speed and seemed to work out. So, we'll see. From the constructor's perspective, yeah, I guess there's a possibility if there's DNFs that Mercedes could finish P2. It looks like Alpine is going to be P4, unless, a miracle happens with McLaren. Alfa Romeo has a 5-point lead over Aston Martin, and then Haas has a 2-point lead over AlphaTauri. So there's still a few millions of dollars in play going into Abu Dhabi this week. So Cole, after Sunday, what are we talking about?
I do think that Mercedes will make the pass on Ferrari. I think Mercedes will be, I'm not going to say the clear-cut leader into 23, but I think they're going to have an advantage. I do think there will be a couple shakeups in the standings, but I do agree that Alpine will finish ahead of McLaren. I think Haas will finish exactly where they're standing. We are talking tens of millions of dollars, but I don't think a whole lot of shakeup's going to happen. Except for I do think that Mercedes has a point to prove in Abu Dhabi. I think they've come back with a vengeance this week.
Sticking on Mercedes for just one quick second. Does Lewis win the finale to keep his streak alive of at least one win in every season of his Formula One career?
Sure. I jumped off the Lewis train mid-season, and I feel like I'm ready to jump back on. I think that he absolutely has the potential to do it, and I do think that Max will power down a little bit. I mean, they may put Checo in Max's car for all we know. We have no clue what's going to happen this week. But I do think that Lewis has a legitimate opportunity to score his continuing win streak.
Matt, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think he's got a shot. I don't know if it'll happen, but I do think he's got a shot. I mean, we saw what he did in Brazil, especially he loves Brazil. He actually kind of had a stronghold on Abu until Max the last couple of years. Technically, he had a stronghold on it last year too until, the safety car and everything. So yeah, I mean, I think he can. I think he can definitely do it. I probably wouldn't put money on it, but I'd love to see it. I'd love to see that streak continue.
Yeah, I mean, if we're into hot takes here, I think Lewis will win Abu Dhabi. I think the only one that beats him is Max potentially. I don't know. Maybe that's more hopeful. I mean, we've talked about this many times on this podcast. That I just appreciate that history. Mercedes seemingly has the momentum. I think there may be a bit of, they came out today and said there will be no preference given to Lewis to continue that streak in Abu Dhabi because that's not what Lewis would want, which I agree with. But I think Lewis will come in knowing that this is his last chance to keep that streak alive, and he'll, rise to the occasion.
Are we going hot takes right now?
Give us a hot take, baby.
I think that the money in the Constructors' Championships doesn't matter, and you may start questioning why somebody may have retired on Sunday after the race. Because
retired from the sport or retired from the race?
Retired from the race, so they don't move up in the constructor standings.
Yeah, I was.
What is What does $10 million mean when you're saving 250 from the cost cap? But that wind tunnel time matters.
That's what I was. I mean, Matt, it's a great point. I had kind of wanted to chime in, but I wanted you guys to be able to speak your mind. Like, George has pretty much all but secured fourth. It's very unlikely that Lewis is able to pass him unless Lewis wins and George DNFs. That's the only way with fastest lap. Like, it's very, very long shot. I could absolutely see Mercedes intentionally pulling back if for some reason they might pass Ferrari, because you don't want to lose the extra 2, 3, 4% wind tunnel time, like energy, whatever, like the CAD program, energy, whatever. The one thing that they would be forfeiting, well, two things, is like the constructor money, which sure 10, 20 million, whatever it would be. And also they would be the third choice of pit stall as opposed to the second choice of pit stall. But like, I don't think that really matters. So I could see, like, it would be interesting if Mercedes won, but I could see them pulling back intentionally to not forfeit that, to get a little bit more edge.
Yeah, I mean, if a Ferrari retires DNFs for whatever reason, I would be sitting there the whole race wondering what Mercedes is going to do. Because at that point, if one Ferrari retires, there's a good chance that they pass them. And say Sainz does what he does best so far this year and doesn't make it past lap 2.
There's no gravel.
Okay, good point. But yeah, I mean, if somebody DNFs on Ferrari, the rest of the race, I'm sitting there wondering if Mercedes is going to have just something weird happens.
Just all of a sudden bring George in to just retire the car for no reason. Be like, nah, we're going to retire the car. Be like
you're all of a sudden going to hear over the radio, George, we're on strategy 42. And then like 2 laps later, it's like, I'm having engine issues, and then he just parks it somewhere.
I would like to mention, we talked about it offline last week, but George Russell beating Lewis, his first season at Mercedes, to walk in and beat a 7-time, 8-time world champion.
7. It's 7.
You know what
easy.
I mean. You know what I mean.
Crofty.
To walk in and beat him, it's a new car, it's a new year, but to walk in and beat him, he's got what a 25-point lead right now. I mean, that's incredible for George Russell. It's incredible. He's got to win this season, the first win for Mercedes this season, but for George to be able to walk in like that, it really shows what an incredible driver he is, and it shows what the talent that Niki Lauda and Toto saw in George in his PowerPoint presentation a couple decades ago, it seems like. So props to George Russell for putting it to a 7, 8-time world champion, Lewis Hamilton.
He And I've been really critical of George. Like he has at times in races intentionally sabotaged the team strategy for himself. Think of Zandvoort when he was guarding Lewis and he put on new softs and Lewis fell back 4 or 5 spots. I think that happened a couple other times too. But George also, up until Silverstone, was like top five the first 5 or 6 or 7 races, whatever. So he just was doing a great job of avoiding any DNFs or any issues. Um, Matt, I'm still going back to the science. Like, you don't think that they would keep science in the race just to help Leclerc potentially?
No, I'm not saying they would D and F signs. I'm saying if he like something happens to him, he wrecks, whatever, there's an issue where he literally cannot go on anymore.
Do you want a real hot take after hearing this conversation? Carlos Sainz will wreck Sergio Perez in turn 1 on Sunday in the first lap to secure second in the. But the irony of that story is that Leclerc will still DNF due to engine failure, and they'll tie. Could you imagine?
I mean,
he just T-bones him into that first looping turn.
Just like I would do if I was trying to call an intentional safety car and the F122, just T-bone him turn 1.
I feel like if there's going to be a T-bone in turn 1, it's going to be Fernando into Esteban. I mean, if anybody's going to do it,
nice little parting gift.
Yeah, absolutely. He's been waiting all season for it. Why not just because if you can take out both Alpines, that means McLaren can jump up in the constructors. That'll take some of the funding from Alpine, so it's an advantage for Fernando at Aston. So yeah, if someone's going to take somebody out, it's going to be Fernando Esteban turn 1 at Alpine.
I would love to see that scenario, obviously hypothetically. And then Fernando gets out of his race car and he unzips his race suit and he's got all green underneath. Like he just he's like, I'm done, throws the tracksuit on the track. Nope, I'm all green. I'm going to testing tomorrow. Peace out, Alpine. I'm on Aston. I could totally see Fernando doing that. That'd be great.
Just a nice little WWE heel turn. That'd be fantastic.
Would. So yeah, I mean, there's a little bit of drama to be had, perhaps on the track. We hope it's a good race. We can't leave this episode without talking about some of the news that came out earlier today. It felt like rumor and then felt like official, but we don't know. Cole, you're our sort of insider on the rumor mill. Is Matteo Binotto out at Ferrari, and who's replacing him potentially?
Yeah, I feel like we've been talking about it for months now. We've been waiting for this to happen. Don't get me wrong. We love Mattia. He's obviously a Ferrari fanatic. He's been there since '95. He's been there since the Schumacher days. So, like, I get it. But to start the season as Ferrari did and to finish the season as they did, there's no excuses. Changes have to happen. It sounds like Fred Vassar from Alfa Romeo will potentially get the nod at Ferrari as the team boss. He used to be the team boss for Charles, so they have some history. He's hysterical. He's awesome. We love Fred. He's been a character in the paddock for as long as I can remember in Formula One. So I think it'd be a great shift for them. The rumor is that he will take the lead in January of next season and that Fred will be gone. So what's interesting about that is that means he's leaving potential Audi money on the table for 2026. So kind of a lot up in the air for him. He's kind of risking a lot by jumping ship to potential Ferrari and leaving Audi, who has confirmed 2026 with Alfa Romeo, which will just be Sauber at the time. So, yeah, lots of rumors. I mean, I love the rumor mill churning, and it sounds like this one. We've all been saying it. So it sounds like Charles maybe has not had a great relationship with Mattia for a handful of months at this point. So change is needed, and Ferrari it sounds like they're looking to the right place with Fred.
Yeah, I know Charles came out, I think last week in the lead up to Brazil. There was, commentary around how, I can't remember exactly what it was. Ferrari was targeting 2025 or 2026 to win a championship. And Charles was like, no, it needs to be next year. Like, I'm going to try next year. So, yeah, we've talked about the Mattia, potential opportunity for him to be fired for months. I think we had a post on August 8th, basically asking the question, should he be fired? So, obviously, we'll see. I'm sure it will happen before this weekend, perhaps after the season. And maybe he gets some sort of graceful promotion into another role within Ferrari because he's been there for quite some time. But yeah, I mean, there's going to be a lot that's ultimately resolved this weekend. But before we do that, I know Egghead's got a little bit of a random stat. What you got for us?
No, I was just gonna. We're gonna. I mean, it's kind of out of the way. We were just talking about George and Lewis. George has come on strong. He's gonna beat Lewis. Lewis, if you go back from race 5 on, so whatever race that was, I don't know the track off the top of my head. But from race 5 on, Lewis has outscored George 203 to 200 points.
Miami.
Yeah, so since then, he is so just Lewis isn't gone away. I don't think anybody thinks that, but George had those first hot weeks, and I just thought that was interesting that Lewis has kind of taken over that right now.
Another thing that I think is interesting coming up, we got Oscar Piastri coming up in FP1 in Abu Dhabi. So I know McLaren has been waiting for about half the season, thinking that Oski P is going to be the guy who slides into that role. So FP1 test for Oscar Piastri. We'll kind of get to see how he compares up against Lando. So the first time he'll be riding that machinery, and also. Aston Martin has come out and said that there will not be a driver 1, driver 2 for next season. Not sure how Fernando Alonso, 2-time world champion, potentially.
Good luck with that.
Right. Potentially 4 or 5-time world champion is going to go up against Lance Strolovich. But they have said there will not be a driver 1, driver 2 combo at Aston Martin next season. No chance that happens. We've been talking about it for months. I cannot wait for Fernando Alonso to get in that green car and take it to Lance Strolovich.
So I guess you get him in with your money and you protect him with your power. Is that what we're doing? That Aston Martin, I guess.
Sounds like it. But you know what? That's the beauty of sports, right? I mean, unfortunately, the 2022 season is about to end in a couple of days, but like all other sports, it seems to be, the look ahead to next season is going to start immediately, right? It probably already has started. There's going to be 4 new drivers on the track. We'll get final resolution to who those folks are, whether it's Nico and Logan Sargent and others. So as always, at the end of the season, there will be resolution. There'll be resolution for P2 in the constructors. There'll be resolution top to bottom on tens of millions of dollars in the constructors championship. We'll see who prevails between Checo and Leclerc, and Alpine and McLaren, and all the battles that will happen in Abu Dhabi this weekend. I know we're looking forward to it. And as always, we'll be back to break it all down after the race on Sunday. So thanks for tuning in. This wraps up a quick midweek episode of the Slipstream and F1 podcast. Catch you on the next episode.